I'm Nate Eaton, and here in our studio today we have Detective Chuck Kunsaitis and Detective Eric Wheeler. Both of them work for the Rexburg Police Department. Both of them pretty involved with the Chad and Lori Daybell case. It's consumed much of their lives over the past 5 years, and so glad you both could come in here and talk with us today. Tell me what was your role, your responsibilities during this investigation?
My initial role was just sort of after the search warrant of Lori's house, of the apartment complex, and just did some French things from there. But ultimately, I got into the finance aspect of it, and then did the travel and also some interviews that kind of came from that, were Chad's, business with Christopher Perret, Nancy James. We did some interviews.
Right, so you went through all the finances, which we'll get to in just a minute. Eric, I think a lot of people remember you because you were the one that actually arrested Chad.
Yep. So at that time, I was a patrol sergeant, and they asked me to go out when they were serving the search warrant on the property. And so I was there during that as a patrol supervisor. And then I arrested Chad. And then shortly after this kicked off, it was probably within a year or so, I moved over to the investigations division and then helped out with certain different tasks that the team asked of me.
Like reading all his books.
Like reading some of his books, yep.
And how was that?
Painful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's go back to the beginning, you guys. When this case first broke, 2019, end of the year, do you remember your initial thoughts when it came in?
I really wasn't a part of it so much as until the search warrant planning was taking place. I was busy doing other things, and Lieutenant Hermosillo Ray had a handful of guys that they were just sort of following up on information from Arizona and Fremont. So I really didn't have a lot of it, and I just remember sitting around, I think it was probably at lunch or something, and they're trying to explain the family tree with Alex, and then you had both Melanies, Lori, Chad, and just trying to figure the whole thing out. It was really confusing. And I was just like, oh man,
Then you add in the alternate names that they gave other people.
Yes.
You have a whole bunch of names. Do you remember, Eric, what you thought?
So I kind of in the same boat as Chuck. I wasn't directly involved initially. We would assist, from the patrol side of things, looking for vehicles or different clues or fielding tips that would come in, and trying to help sift through some of that. So that was kind of my initial role. I know I talked a lot with the investigators and what we could do and what their thoughts were, and and it was mixed at the time, at the very beginning. Nobody really knew what to expect, or I don't think any of us expected the outcome that we ended up having.
But as time went on, I would imagine as it grows and gets more media attention and it starts developing the legs all over the place, I'm sure you're all pulled in to help, right?
Yeah. Our then Chief Shane Turman, when we put out the press release saying missing kids, I think it was around December 20th, he was just like, whatever you guys need, and that was one thing I really appreciated about that. So, but we just started, following up on all this information, and then the information that was coming in was just, so much. And then it started, okay, we need to have, A, B, and C done, and they started making assignments. And I ended up getting with the financial stuff, and started, I actually, they had some abandoned mail at the post office boxes in Sugar City, and also in Rexburg, and so that's kind of was a treasure trove for us because it had all the bank statements, it had wireless phone bills, IRS stuff, Social Security stuff, and so that allowed us to go ahead and write paper and start getting in all this information. So that was huge. It was a massive undertaking, no doubt. And then later on, I think it was at the end of January, Mike Douglas, he was the forensic accountant for the FBI. He came on board, and we worked side by side through the whole thing. And we ended up around 80 accounts, and that involved Chad and Tammy, Alex, Melanie Boudreau, now Melanie Pulowski, Lori and Tiley.
80 accounts.
80 accounts.
And what are you doing with these accounts? Are you going through line by line?
Going through line by line, you know, we're trying to find the kids, right? Because Lori's not saying where they're at, and so we figured, okay, if they're somewhere, maybe they're, you know, paying money to somebody or something. And then we started taking on, you know, as we started going through it all, you started seeing like the behaviors of Tylee, where she's got money coming in every month from her Social Security stipends. She's got a Jeep payment. She's responsible, but she's a teenager. She's making all these, you know, in-store purchases, and she's, you know, spending like you would think a normal teenager would. And then right around September 1st, it just goes off the grid, where everything now converts from in-person to just online stuff. And I remember taking that to Ray, and Ray was looking through, I think he had some phone information from Tylee, and started looking at her phone activity, and it kind of coincided that, okay, something's wrong here, because it was just like, she just, you know, kind of stopped. And so, and that was something we really kind of zeroed in on.
So she's using her card at gas stations, fast food restaurants, going in person to these places. And then suddenly, September 1st of 2019, the pattern changes.
Yeah, they were moving up from Arizona, and you can see her purchases in Arizona and Utah, and then they just kind of stopped once they got to Idaho. And it was just kind of, you know, that's a red flag for us. And so we were like, okay. And then knowing what we know now, she was only in the state for 8 days.
Right. The prosecutors had the theme in the trials: money, power, sex. Money, the first one they talked about, and you're going through all of these transactions. Was there one smoking gun or one major thing as you're going through these that you're like, whoa, that really grabbed you, or was it more of a pattern?
There was a couple things that grabbed us after we had received from her Lori's BBVA, her personal account that only she had access to, when she started had Tylee's money deposited into her account, and Tylee did not have any control over her account anymore. And then we go back and look a little closer to it. So I believe it was like the 28th of August was the last deposit, or the first deposit into Lori's BBVA account. And then all of a sudden, Tylee's dead, you know, 10 days later. And then we look at JJ. You know, today is the 23rd of September. It's a big date in the case, because we believe that this is the time when JJ was murdered. We look at the Social Security deposits. Once Lori had started receiving the Social Security monies from Charles from his death, and you know, she had JJ's money as well for being the guardian to a minor. Once those monies dropped, JJ's killed. And so we kind of were looking at the grand scheme of things. We know that Lori was looking for the $1 million policy of Charles back in July, and when a week later she found out she wasn't the beneficiary of the money, she calls Chad or texts Chad and says, I'm not going to get the $1 million, but I'll have, I think it was like $4,500 in Social Security. So she's already planning to get the Social Security money. But then we started looking at it closer. We see that, okay, the money hits her account. We don't need Tylee anymore. We kill Tylee. Money hits the account for her, which she's getting monies. They kill JJ. And the other thing I want to bring up, actually there's two more. One of the big ones was that on Christmas Day, 2019, Lori is in Hawaii, and there's a late fee payment that needs to be made on the apartment complex, and she used Tylee's credit card or Tylee's bank card to make that late payment.
The apartment in Rexburg.
In Rexburg.
She uses her dead daughter's card to pay it on
Yep.
Christmas.
Yep. And the other big one was having to deal with Chad, was when Tammy's funeral was on October 23rd for Rexburg. They had a funeral service. She was buried on the 22nd in Springville. They had a funeral service on the 23rd, and 5 days later, Chad is purchasing airline tickets to go get married November 1st for her in Hawaii with her and Lori. 5 days.
5 days
after a funeral service.
And you're tracking everywhere he's spending his money, at least on cards,
Yes.
bank
And
accounts.
Chad, for his involvement, really tried to keep a very low profile of his footprint of where he was at. It always seemed to be Lori was paying for him. When Chad was go out of town, you would never see any business transactions. You would think, well, being an owner of a book company, doesn't have any travel expenses. It's just kind of weird. He goes to Arizona, there's no transactions, and then he was in Utah, not really spending a lot of money, but everywhere he was meeting up with Lori, we think that Lori was just,
She was paying.
yeah.
Well, that kind of fits as far as his cell phone activity when he had contacted Google and asked them to stop tracking him. Before one of the witnesses testified that he had tracking on his Google phone turned off so that they couldn't track his location. It makes you wonder if with the finances he tried to keep as low profile as possible so that you all couldn't track him.
Yeah, and he didn't carry a lot of cash with him. Only after when he got the insurance money from Tammy's death did they actually keep cash on hand.
And how much was that payout again?
There was 2 policies totaling $430,000. There was a $300,000 policy and a $130,000 policy.
The other question, do you recall how much Lori got after her third husband died from that life insurance policy?
Well, I believe it was right around $75,000 or $80,000, and there was some money that was sent to Annie Cushing. We tracked her down, gave her some money that she was entitled to,
right.
from that, and then the rest. I think there was, I want to say, $60,000-ish. It's been a little while now.
Right.
So, but basically, she and Charles paid off some debt, and then Lori took $25,000 off of that to open up her bank account, and then gave $5,000 to Colby and Tylee.
Do you think she had anything to do with Joseph's death?
Oh,
I know that's
a
pure
loaded-
speculation.
Pure speculation, loaded question, and I don't feel comfortable answering.
Okay. Eric, do you want to comment on that?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
Well, let's continue along the money path. You talked about how once he got the life insurance policies, the cash, he started having large amounts of cash. When you pulled him over in that June 9th, he's in the back seat of your car, and for the first time in his trial, we saw that video where he's talking with his daughter about all the finances and where to find cards and cash and whatnot. What did you think the first time you saw that video? Were you in the police car at that time, or were you outside?
No, I was outside, and that's a typical, if you want to call it a tactic that we use. There's times where we'll put 2 people that we've arrested in the same vehicle and let them talk and glean a little bit of information out of them that way. So I was just outside the vehicle within, so I could keep and monitor him if he needed something or answer questions as they came in. But so we didn't review that full footage till after the fact. And so yeah, when we're reviewing that and he's talking about the finances and yeah, I'm not going to be coming back and those type of comments that I'm talking to Ray and Rob and saying, hey, this is some pretty good valuable information we could possibly use or because he mentioned some cash in the house and so it was a little ways after before we made it through that whole video and that conversation.
Yeah, there were a lot of commenters actually that were saying, we can't believe that they let Emma talk with her dad for so long, whereas I took the thought of, let them talk. I mean, wouldn't you? As you said, you never know. Same with Chad and Lori calling each other every day, all day. You never know what they're going to say.
Yeah, and he's not saying, I don't know what's going on, I'll have to call my attorney, maybe I'll be home by dinner time. There's none of that,
Yeah.
and when he goes, probably won't be coming back.
Yeah.
That was huge.
That was big. What was it like to pull him over? Do you remember, were you told once he took off, go get him?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. So my assignment was to kind of monitor his movements if he was in the area, and he had gone over to across the street to his daughter's house, and so he was there. So during that whole morning, I had been kind of watching that, doing scene security, making sure people aren't coming into the scene as everybody's searching. And so at the very first, he had moved his car from that back driveway on the east side of the house. He had moved that over to the front driveway on the west side of his house, and he backed it in there. and that was primarily to let the evidence team and everybody have access to that back portion of the property. And so as he's on the phone, and I'm not necessarily within earshot of him, but I can just see him. And he's on and off the phone. He's trying to see as best he could where they're searching, and I think I testified to this in the trial. But when the dogs had showed up and started searching, you could tell that he had perked up and was really interested in where the dogs were, especially when they were around the pond area in that tree. And so, we had discussed that. I can't remember who I told, hey, he's interested in whatever those dogs are doing over there. And so shortly after that, he went over to Emma's house, and I just kind of kept an eye on him, as well as just the traffic through that area. And I remember seeing him. It was Detective Schmidt at the time. Him and I were talking, and Detective Schmidt was part of the surveillance team, so if Chad were to leave, him and a few other officers would kind of tail him and surveil Chad if he left that area. And so we were talking, and Chad had come out of Emma's house, and we kind of made comment, okay, he's leaving. So Rick was getting ready, or Detective Schmidt was getting ready to go follow him. And about that same time, I don't remember who it was, Vinny, Ray, Ron, a few of them come running across the lawn and said, hurry, go stop him. I didn't know, I had no idea what they'd found at that time.
You didn't know JJ had been found?
No, I didn't know any of that at that time. And so I jump in my car and go stop him. Still not knowing really what we had him exit the vehicle. About that time, Lieutenant Ball had showed up and told me to take him into custody, and I put handcuffs on him and put him in my car. And then we went back to his house, his property, and the prosecutors were trying to decide which jail facility to take him to. So while we were waiting there at that location is when Emma came over and had that conversation with him. And then I was told all these details of what they had found and all of that at that time.
Right. What was his demeanor when you pulled him over? Was he nervous, normal?
He was probably a little nervous, but more normal than you would expect of somebody that have a bunch of officers searching their property, and then you just get stopped and put in handcuffs. It was a little shocking. And then after I found out, what they had found, then I thought, man, this behavior is just not normal for somebody if they were innocent. You found what? And there was none of that.
Right. Where do you think he was going?
I don't know. I know that Pryor and the defense team was trying to say that he was going to meet with his attorney, but the timing of it was just odd to me, because as soon as they uncover JJ, he's leaving. And so it's like, did he know that we'd caught him and he was trying to get away, or what was his thought process? I don't know.
One of the other assignments you all had, I believe, was to listen to the phone calls between Chad and Lori. She was arrested in March of 2020. He wasn't arrested until June. So over the course of those, 3 or 4 months, how often would they speak to each other?
It was just our luck that they probably spoke for 8 to 10 hours a day, if not more.
A day?
Be on the phone constantly. And it was painful. It was probably Eric reading Chad's books.
What can you give us an idea of? You say painful. I mean, was it?
Well, it's just like they talked in code a lot, and as the case started to unfold, we could kind of see what they were, the things that they were saying. We kind of understood what they were referencing. Lori was wanting to get out of jail. She was hoping to get out of jail early on because COVID hit, and they were letting everybody out of jail. So she was very frustrated. During that time, there was talk of Chad wanting to put a mobile home or another home of something on his property for he and Lori to live in, and Chad would actually bring in, blueprints of mobile homes, and Lori would, the first one he brought in, Lori wasn't too thrilled about it, and so he'd come back I don't know, a couple days later, and he would have a new set of blueprints, and it was,
So they're making plans to actually physically be together.
well, yes.
Did they really believe it? I mean, do you think that they really thought that it would be happening?
I think on some level, I think they were absolutely believing that they were going to be together.
And she'd be living in a mobile home out at his property.
Well, that was one, at least that's what he was
He was presenting.
he was presenting her at the time. And then as time moved on, he would try to keep her spirits up, but I don't think, there was never, I don't know, they just had their relationship moments. They would argue, or they would just tell how much each other they loved each other, and and things will work out, but it was hard on the ears.
And you all have to listen, obviously, in case they say something, because at this point, you're still looking for the children.
We're still looking for the kids, and that was the whole emphasis of this investigation was we're going to find the kids. And then as we would have regular meetings, and then everybody would kind of present to the group, okay, this is what we found since our last meeting, and we had just started painting this picture and just filling it with the information. And then one thing that I could say was we knew where they weren't, right? Because we were just, every tip that came in, we were chasing them down, hoping to find something. We just from trying to chase down the pharmacy records. JJ needed medication, so right. We would chase all that down. There was no refills or anything like that. Tylee didn't. They were trying to say Tylee had some medical issues. She did, but she wasn't incapacitated by them. She was just an active, normal teenager. So there was a whole lot there. There was, like again, Melanie Boudreau had a bunch of cash. But we kind of learned that was from the divorce with Brandon. So I don't want to get too much into that because there's still some pending stuff with that. But so we were like, trying to figure it out, but we knew where they weren't. And we figured once Lori had her court date, because they were telling us the whole time, this is her get out of jail free card, and literally she had to, do a FaceTime call or something with the kids, just to show us that they were okay, and we would have said, okay, see you later.
Right.
But she never presented the kids, and then I think the overwhelming majority of us were like, okay, I don't think the kids are alive, but you still want to hold out hope.
Did Chad and Lori ever talk about the kids?
It's funny you asked that question, because not once. I think, there was at least one time Lori referred to Tylee as a kid, and I can't remember if she was talking to Summer or to Colby, but never once did they talk about the kids at all in the jail phone calls. Not once. And I just recall Lori talking about Tylee one time, and I think it was to Colby. Colby would ask, but Lori would just pivot and onto something else. But even when Chad and Lori were talking, they never talked about the kids at all.
They talk about Tammy?
Yeah, they were a little disparaging towards Tammy. But nothing salacious. It was just Chad wasn't happy with Tammy, and but they really didn't talk about any of that.
Were you all fully apprised of the investigation when Alex Cox died?
Yeah.
So do you remember your reaction when you found out he was dead?
Yeah, I think I was in a class in Las Vegas with Ron and Vince. And we were on a break at class, and then I think it was the lieutenant from, if it was Gilbert, came over and says, hey, you guys, Alex Cox, you guys, we're like, yeah, what's up? And then he told us that, they just had a medical run at the house and he was dead. And we're just like, oh no. So that was like, we figured if there was, people we could talk to, he wasn't going to be available at some point, because he wasn't, that was just really shocking to us, especially given the day. It was the day after Tammy was exhumed, I think. Right. So just, is it a coincidence? I don't know. In our job, we don't really believe in coincidences too much, but sometimes I don't know,
Crazy coincidence.
Crazy.
If it is. What do you remember, Eric? Were
So
you?
I remember getting a call, I think it was from Ray, called and told me, but I remember more of my reaction when they were, they released that it was, natural. And I'm like, no, there's no way. There's no way because of the timing and everything else. And so, yeah, I think my thoughts and feelings are the same as everybody, like shock and like, what are the odds of that?
They said that Alex, he was a truck driver by trade, and so he did a lot of road time, so maybe that contributed to
Right.
the blood clots.
I've always wondered if he had lived, if he would have turned on them. If he would have seen, it seemed what he told Zulema is that if I might be the fall guy, would he have told all? Or would you have a third trial with him?
My personal thoughts are, especially with the team that we had, they would have been able to get some information out of him, is my thoughts. But
Let's go to June 9th, 2020. So you all knew, I believe the night before or a few days before, that you were going to go do this search. And did everybody have an assignment out of the property?
Yeah, they gave out assignments. There was a meeting
night
the
before.
night before, and they issued the assignments. So we were all met up at the church right there next to Chad's house with the big blue FBI bus and all the investigators. And when we got word after they served the warrant to Chad, that we all rolled down, and they turned the cadaver dogs loose. And so we were waiting until they're done, and then we just started, going through our areas of assignment. And mine was, there was a shed where the dogs had hit. So we, along with the EG guys, we pulled out some of the bins and everything, and then they sent the dogs back in. There was nothing there. And then it was to the pet cemetery, where I think Vince and I were probing. That's where we found a cat and a dog in the pet cemetery there. And then they started looking over where we ultimately found JJ. And so they were working on that, and we had moved from the pet cemetery. I was out to the fire ring, where we started, sifting through stuff, myself and Mike and a couple of the other investigators, and we would start coming across little pieces of tissue and bone. We didn't know at the time whether or not they were of any significance, because it's a rural property, and sometimes they'll burn pets or they'll burn animals, kind of a thing, right? So we just kind of collected them, and then when they came upon JJ, we all just went over there and started slowly unearthing him. And then, when they cut into the plastic and, a little bit of JJ's hair came out, that's kind of picks up right where Eric saw everybody running towards him saying, get him, get him. And we were there, and we were just like, it was kind of an unreal, surreal moment that, looking now that, okay, we have JJ, and it was, yeah.
When you
Tough
went,
deal.
when you all were going in that morning, did you think that would be the day? That both those kids would be found? And
I don't know.
I don't know that I did. I can speak for me. I don't know that I did, because I thought, who would kill two kids and bury them in their backyard, But you've got to do your due diligence, and at this point we just want to find these kids. That is all we want, and so we're going to do anything, even if it seems so unrealistic. We're gonna try it. So and then at the first probably hour that they were out there, just the way that they were kind of acting, I'm like, oh, maybe nothing's here. But when I started getting a little bit more hope that, okay, maybe we've come across something, is when his behavior started changing. He started getting a little more, curious of what they were doing out there, and so, yeah, I think initially I just like, there's no way we're gonna find him here.
so as you're out there in the dirt, finding these pieces of tissue and bone, and then JJ's found, and then you realize this is Tylee. What's going through your mind? Is it more do the job, focus on this, rather than the reality that these might be kids, or
Yeah.
a bit of everything?
That's something. I mean, I've been almost 25 years in the job now, and Eric almost as long. You know, you just kind of get conditioned to go into kind of like an autopilot, or where you go in because you have something bad right here in front of you, and you just have to like, okay, this is what we need to do, and so you do your job. At the end of the day, when we all left, and you, it's only then really we have the time to collect your thoughts and process it. I don't know, it was a little rough for me. I don't know about Eric, but then knowing that you had to come back the next day because we had found Tylee, and there was a couple of us that were just like, we wanted to stay and get Tylee, but we just knew because of how, at least how I remember it, just we weren't gonna, there wasn't enough, time, daylight hours, those kinds of things because of the way she was found. So we had to leave her there that night, and that was a little rough on us all, knowing that, okay, we had removed JJ, and then Tylee had to stay out there by herself that night. The police presence were there, but I know it all weighed on us.
Right. And then you were able to collect the rest of her the next day.
Yeah.
And then it takes a whole new turn, the investigation, obviously, because now you can charge him with murder and it goes forth. So what did you do to help prepare for the trials, which ended up being several years after because of all the delays? Is that when you really did a deep dive on all the finances and everything?
Yeah, so we went back and we looked at all the, Mike and I looked at all the dates that were kind of, highlight dates of, like the day they got married or the day we found the kids, and we looked at Chad's account the morning we found the kids, and we saw that he had moved money to his kids. He gave Emma, I think, Garth, Seth, and I want to say Mark. I think Leah was the only one that didn't. That Chad moved $8,000 into their account, and so we're like, okay, what time did he move it? Because we know from the dash cam that Chad was saying, okay, here's my passwords. This is where the money's at if you need to do something. But I think it was just, I want to say maybe an hour before, if not less than an hour before we found JJ, that he was moving money to their accounts like he knew he was going to get arrested.
Wow.
And so that really kind of stood out. And then you go back and look at the day we searched the house in January. We helped Fremont County on a search warrant there, and he had moved a little bit of money to the kids. So it was those kinds of things that we were able to go back and look at, okay, what's going on in the case at certain times, and you look at their behaviors, and I learned a ton from Mike Douglas. Somebody coined him Superman because he was just so good at doing that kind of stuff.
And this was all money that came from Tammy's life insurance.
All the money came from because Chad didn't have a lot of money. Chad didn't make a lot of money. Tammy didn't make a lot of money.
But she and he had upped their policy to the maximum, her policy.
Yep.
Before she died.
Yeah, right before her first attempt on her life, we believe, and
Right.
in that first or second week of October.
And she died on a Saturday morning or late Friday night.
Yeah.
And Monday morning he's at the school district office asking how to file to get the money.
Yep.
So you're piecing this all together. When she was in jail, was he sending Lori money?
Yeah, he, we all have our theories. Mike and I think I will speak for Mike on this. They know what they did, and so she's in jail and he is not. So we're thinking he's trying to appease her as best he can by giving her as much as he can, so she would have deliveries of, clothes and goodies and things like that. I think he was trying to help her out as best he could because, at any given time she could just say, okay, this is what happened. And so I think that somehow that played a little bit of it. But he spent a lot of money on her.
On the commissary,
Oh, yes.
too. So what did you think when the guilty verdict came down? Were you both in the courtroom? No, were you?
Yes.
Yeah. Eric, what did you think?
I mean, I don't know if I could express the emotion I had, but it was some closure that I personally needed, because you see the team do all this work, and it was just a sense of, oh my heck, the work paid off, and that's probably the best way to describe it, is that yes, the work paid off. There's justice, some justice for these kids and their family, and yeah, it was a good feeling in that circumstance, if that makes sense.
Because you both weren't able to watch the trials because you were
No.
witnesses or listen to it.
Yeah, couldn't do any of that.
So you had no idea really where it was going other than the days you testified.
Yeah.
But you were able to come in for the verdict, and what did you
Yes.
think, Chuck?
I just, along with Eric, it was just, to put in perspective, I mean, the amount of hours and dedication that all this group of investigators that came together and put their egos aside and just, looked at the end game and to get the verdicts that we did, that part was so exhilarating, knowing that your hard work helped achieve what we were, trying to do. And then again, God, but why were we there, right? JJ and Tylee, Tammy. And so, it really played with my emotions a lot. But I couldn't be more proud to work alongside a group of individuals that we did. But I was pretty emotional. I'm a pretty emotional guy as it is, but.
Yeah, I remember walking out of the courtroom. You gave me this huge hug. I don't know where I was. You would just grab me.
I was just looking to hug people. Like
I know, you were hugging everybody. It was definitely a day of relief.
Yeah.
Knowing what you know now, do you think one was leading the other along? Like, do you think there was one mastermind, Chad or Lori?
I don't know. The information that I had to deal with and read and see, I feel like they played off each other a lot. Like, there'd be one thing that Chad would try to get her to buy into, and then and the theme that the prosecutors used, I mean, that describes it to a T. The sex, the power, the money, they just played different roles in that, it seems like, and I feel like it was fairly equal. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, they were a perfect storm, and they played off each other. So.
Going through all of that financial stuff, did you ever get angry?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. When we saw that, when the money hit the account and then they were killed, we're like, it was just infuriating. And then the little things like, making that late payment, or, they went to Gravity Factory. It's a trampoline park in Rexburg. This didn't come out at trial, but, Lori using JJ Ryan as a name, little things like that, showing up with Chad's family, and she checked in as Lori Daybell, to go trampolining with Chad's kids right after they got married. And then you would see them travel to California, and they went to Knott's Berry Farm, and we were able to reach out and contact, Mike contacted Knott's Berry Farm, and you see the actual physical
registration form.
yeah, the tickets,
Yeah.
and everybody had a name except for JJ and Tylee. And what 16-year-old and what 7-year-old little boy doesn't want to go to Knott's Berry Farm? So it was things like that that would just eat away at you, and I'd get upset, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just for what?
Right.
For sex, money, power.
Right.
So
what did you learn from all this?
I learned a lot. Mm-hmm. I mean, I at the time was a patrol sergeant, aspiring. I wanted to be a detective, and shortly after I moved over, and I'm still look back and I'm like, this is incredible. The teamwork, that the assignments everybody had, the roles everybody played, I took so much from this, and I've still got quite a bit of career left in me, and I'm going to use every little thing that I learned from this case to help me in my future in the cases that I'd have to come across. And so hopefully it's nothing like this, but I learned so much, and then also just how to like control those emotions, because there were times where you were just, I remember the day that Chad was arrested, after we'd taken him to Fremont County Jail, I'd come back and they had me help out there digging, because they had located where Tylee was, and like Chuck said, you get in this mindset of just get the work done, do what you got to do. But I remember driving home that night and having those same thoughts, like, and just the anger, and like, how does anybody do that to these kids, and thinking about Tammy and their families, and just the anger and having to control that through not only the search and what you're doing, but in trial and court, and trying to keep your composure because of all those emotions. And so that's something that I didn't think I would take away from it, but looking back, I'm like, wow. And it just gives kudos to everybody that had to do that and go through that and just do the job and try to keep their emotions aside and not let that get the best of you.
And to not let any drama get involved. When you have all those agencies, federal, state, and multiple states, the fact that everyone got along.
We, there were times we had a meeting in Salt Lake in, I think it was March of 2020, where all the agencies represented themselves along with the prosecuting attorneys from their jurisdictions, and we had this go around, and I just remember going out, that night of the first night, and it was just like we were just one big family. I mean, everybody just seemed to click, and you're like, okay, maybe it was just for the, the one-time thing or whatever, but then it just, as the case unfolded and continued on, when, guys were on, where they go out and travel, and they would go, it was just like, it was just family. And that was, I remember one of the FBI analysts, Nikki Heidelman, when towards the end of Chad's trial, she's just like, this is our, we were talking about, I'm not going to be able to, come over and see you very often anymore, right? Things are going to change. It's almost like high school's getting, people graduating and then going their separate ways.
Right.
And Nikki's like, this is our family. And it's true. And, for the amount of information that was out there and generated, and the number of investigators, and for everybody just to get along, there was really not a lot of drama. I can't recall any drama with the investigators, right? And so it was just it was awesome. Every time that they just show up, it was just like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
And then you go out and do your thing.
What did you learn?
Well, I had a really good teacher in Mike Douglas. I know when I first started, before he came on board, going through some of the accounts and looking at behaviors, learning that humans are creatures of habit, right? We like certain brands of things. We go to certain places to eat, those kinds of things. And so I was on the right track of that. And then when Mike came in, he sort of, put it all in a nice little format to where it was, I was able to, just to sit alongside him and learn and digest all he was, putting out there to take in. So from an investigative point, I learned a ton, and I have him to thank for that. And then, I've been on for quite a bit. I have a couple of years left maybe, and I'll be done with it. I guess got to piggyback off of what Eric was saying. Working alongside these people and the team effort, and that what you can accomplish just by putting your egos aside, and it's not about who gets the credit or this and that. It was nothing like that. It was like, we have 2 missing kids and we have a dead spouse, and then we find JJ and Tylee, and it's like, okay, let's go do this. And that's what it was all about. It was, oh, it's us and it's them. It was none of that. And it's hard to say, because I've been a part of, and I'm sure Eric has too, of multi-agency kind of investigations, and there's always 1 or 2 that are just it is what it is. But in a case this big, this size, with this many jurisdictions and egos, there was none of that. It's hard to explain, and I'm very grateful for that.
What was it like being out there the other day when the house came down, walking around the property the day before the house came down? You hadn't been back, right?
I hadn't been back. Occasionally I would drive by the property and sit and, and have a few words for JJ, Tylee, and Tammy from the roadway. But that was the first time being back on the property. And Ray and I were talking, and he was like, does this seem smaller out here? Like the area that we were searching at the time, it just seemed like it was just so massive. And then when you being out there, it really wasn't that that big of an area. And then knowing from the satellite images of where Tylee and where JJ and all of that, you could still see some of the backfill from where we had Tylee. Walking through the house, going into Chad and Tammy's bedroom, I had some personal thoughts to myself on that when I was walking through and there was no one else in the house. And, just the horrors that were there and the unnecessary horrors that were there for people that were just selfish and didn't care about anybody but themselves. So it was weird. And knowing that we were, all our hard work was on the right track that put us out there by sifting through the information that put us out in the back of that property, June. So, yeah.
And got everybody where they are today because of it. What do you want to add?
I don't think I have anything. It's been refreshing to have, just at the police department, having the community members like that. That's incredible to have the support that we have here in East Idaho from the community members.
And really around the world too, because people are following it everywhere.
Right, and just having that support, because you see some of these around the country that the agencies just don't have the community support, and it makes it difficult for investigators and officers to do their job. And you would hope that a case like this wouldn't create any of that, but I think that the support of the community definitely helped with some motivation. And hey, we're doing this. We're going to do it the right way. We're going to stick together. And so I guess I do want to say that I really do appreciate the community support, the support of our administrations and the team that I got to work with.
Yeah, I'm not going to follow up on that because he just said it perfectly.
I remember driving out there on June 10th, the second day, and on the radio they were talking about defund the police and how there were protests across the country about defunding the police. And I'm thinking, what a juxtaposition between that, as you all are out there in the heat of that hot summer day looking for pieces of a child. I mean, it didn't make any sense to me then, and I think people that were pushing that back then maybe are having some second thoughts now. But anyway, thank you for your work.
Thank you. Appreciate all your help and support through this whole thing.
Well, kudos to you, the entire department, all of the investigators that did everything, and thanks for putting up with all those phone calls and all those financial records.
Yes.
It helped get us where we are today. Detective Chuck Kunsaitis, Detective Eric Wheeler from the Rexburg Police Department. Nice having you here.